Welcome to a Catholic Journey podcast, where we navigate life after grief, faith, and how they shape our everyday lives. I'm your host, Jessica Diaz. Join me as we explore how to lean on God in hard times, embrace the beauty of the Catholic faith, and walk this journey together. Welcome to the very first episode of A Catholic Journey. My name is Jessica Diaz, and I am super excited and super nervous to be recording this podcast. I would have never imagined in my wildest dreams that I would be starting a podcast, let alone one that is based off of grief and faith. But here we are. I want to start by sharing my testimony with you, and I will do my very best to keep things to the point and not ramble on and on and on. So, a little bit about me. I am married. I've been married for almost 17 years now, and I have 3 beautiful children. I grew up Catholic, although I would say that we were more surface level Catholics. So I remember going to church during Easter, maybe an Ash Wednesday here and there. I never read the Bible. I was baptized. I did my first communion. I never did my confirmation, and I did, in fact, get married in the Catholic Church, which would have some fellow Catholics shocked to hear, but I did, in fact, get married in the Catholic Church, and that can be a story for another episode. But that was pretty much the foundation of my faith, outside of me believing in God and believing that He loved me just the way I was. I wasn't very centered in my faith. I didn't practice my faith. I did baptize my children when they were born, and 2 of my kids have completed their first communions. But up until 3 years ago, that was pretty much it. I was a Catholic out of habit. I had no relationship with God. I didn't even understand the Bible or what was in it. So 3 years ago, where this entire journey began, my parents passed away. I lost my mom in January of 2022, and then exactly 30 days later, I lost my dad. And I was devastated. I mean, I was 40-something years old. I can't do the math right now. I was probably 41 years old, and I felt like an orphan. I lost my home base. The people who brought me into this world, who created me, were gone. And I felt very alone in this world and very lost. And that was a very, very difficult time for me, because not only was I navigating grief and the loss of my parents, I was also navigating being a mom and a wife and taking care of my home and finding myself having to step back into my routine while I was grieving. And it's crazy to me thinking about it, how that even works. But you find yourself, and if you've lost a loved one, you will know exactly what I'm talking about. But it's almost like this outside of your body type of experience where you are screaming on the inside and you are looking around on the outside and the world just keeps going. Homework assignments are still due. Dinner still needs to be made. Laundry still needs to be folded. And you are just drowning on the inside of how does the world keep going? And so it was during that time after my parents passed away where I was in this deep grief, and I didn't know what to do with myself, to be honest. I would take my kids to school in the morning and cry the whole way there and cry the whole way back, and find myself having to interact with people. And deep down inside, I would just keep saying, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry, because I didn't want to make them uncomfortable. And this went on for a bit, and I found myself in this space of I felt like someone was calling me, is the best way I can explain it. I remember at this time, my kids had started back to school. So this had been a couple of months after my parents passed away. And I was dropping my son off at school, and I just, I felt it, but I almost heard it inside of me. Someone say, "Why don't you just go inside the church? Why don't you just go light a candle for your parents?" That is something I never did. I never just went into church to sit there or hang out or whatever. And I kept feeling this nudge: come into church, come sit with me, light a candle. And finally, one day I did. I dropped my kids off at school and I drove up to my church. I was so nervous because I didn't know what to do. And I saw the Virgin Mary statue up in front on the left-hand side of the altar. And I walked in and I lit 2 candles for my parents. And I sat down and I just cried my eyes out. It was so comforting, is the best word I can think of. I felt comforted inside of the church, crying my eyes out. I didn't really pray anything at first. I didn't know what to pray for, but I would just cry. And so I started going more frequently. I would drop my kids off at school and I would make my way to church and I would light a candle for my parents and I would sit in one of the pews and I would just cry. And then I would start talking to God and I would say, I don't know why I'm here, but I hear you. I feel you calling me, and so I'm here. And I would pray for my parents, and I would pray for just peace, to not feel the ache that I felt. That continued for some time, and I really feel, I know that God was calling me to Him. He saw my brokenness. He saw how lost I felt inside without my parents. And He called on me. And He called me to His home to comfort me so that I can survive what I was feeling. And I did, obviously. 3 years later, I'm still here. But it was during that time that I truly felt God's presence. I felt His voice. I heard His voice. I can feel Him calling on me. That sort of started this slow chain reaction of my faith journey. And it was through my grief that I was able to be aware of it, to acknowledge it, and to be open to it. Because I think prior to my parents passing away, like I said, I was just a surface Catholic. If you asked me if I believed in God, I would say 1,000%, but I had no relationship with Him. I didn't know what it was to feel God's presence because I was so in my own world, and I never really considered so much the hand that God plays in all of it. So fast forward, I want to say it was almost a year after I lost my parents. I really felt this desire to learn the Bible. I was on this faith journey. I was sitting in the church and I was trying to pray the best way I knew how and just having conversations with God. And I just felt this calling to learn about the Bible. And it was at that time I heard about Father Mike Schmitz and the Bible in a Year podcast, which is amazing and I highly recommend. If you are wanting to learn more about the Bible, to read the Bible, I definitely recommend you listen to that podcast. It makes it so digestible and not so intimidating. And Father Mike Schmitz has a great way of sort of explaining everything that you're reading in a very clear and simple way to understand. So I will link the podcast in the show notes of this episode and definitely go check that out. And that is not a sponsored ad at all. I am just genuinely a fan of the podcast and I have not been perfect with it. I started the podcast maybe the end of 2022, beginning of 2023, and we are at the time of this recording in April of 2025, and I am only on day, I think, 158. So it's definitely been a slow journey, but a journey nonetheless. And I got my first Bible, which I'd never in my life owned a Bible, let alone open one. So that was such a big deal for me because I was able to open the Word of God and actually look and read what He actually teaches us, as opposed to just things I would hear offhand or quotes that I would see posted online that I had no idea if they were accurate or not. So as I was in this process of reading the Bible, listening to it in the podcast with Father Mike Schmitz, I started to see God speaking to me. I know that sounds crazy, but there were verses in the Bible that would just pop out to me and really just speak to me in such a deep way that I would see that and say, wow, God, I hear you. You're speaking to me. It's so crazy. And if you've never experienced that before, it's so hard to explain. But if you have, you know exactly what I'm talking about. One of the Bible verses that stood out to me in the very beginning was from Psalm 34:18. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. When I read that, I was like, did you write that for me? Because that is me. I am so brokenhearted. I am so crushed. I have nothing else to hold on to except for my faith because without it, I am so lost. And that's how I felt. I just felt so lost. And when I would read that Bible verse, I can feel that God is there with me. I am the brokenhearted one. I am crushed in spirit. And when I was at my lowest, I heard Him call on me. And He would say, come to the church, sit with me, just sit with me. That was such a profound time in my life because it's not something that I vocalized to everyone. It was just these quiet actions that I would do because I felt that that's what God was leading me to do. And it took me a while to listen, but I did. And once I started, I just didn't want to turn back from it. That kind of came full circle because it's almost like one thing led to another thing, led to another thing. So, here I am, lost and brokenhearted. I lost my parents. I can feel God calling on me. I then feel Him calling me to read the Bible, to learn more about my faith and actually be in a relationship with God, because that is something that I've never had, I've never experienced, and it's something that I didn't even consider or think that was possible. It was so outside of my mindset that once I started diving into it and really opening my eyes to my faith, it was overwhelming, really. There's so much information to take in. And fast forward, what kind of led me here is I found myself last year actually really feeling this calling in my heart to complete my confirmation. And that for sure is something that I never even thought about for a second. When my husband and I were engaged, I knew that I wanted to get married in the Catholic Church. And I thought at that time, oh, I'm going to have to do my confirmation and take these classes, and it's going to be such a drag. But whatever, I'll get it done because this is, we want to get married in the church. And so when my priest who was going to marry me told me that I didn't have to do my confirmation in order to get married, I was excited. I honestly was like, yes, I don't have to do it. Awesome. Like, let's keep moving. And so to now be in a place where my heart wants it so bad, I can't even explain it, but it was this instant feeling. And again, sort of like someone telling me, you should get this done. You need to do this. And I did. I signed up for classes, and I'm currently doing the OCIA program at my local church, and I'm due to complete my confirmation on Pentecost of this year, which I'm super excited about. It's something that I would have never even been excited about before, but here we are. It's crazy how through my grief journey, I have found this faith journey, and it has led me to this point where I'm taking these classes, and I have met the most amazing people who share this love and this love and this thirst for God, and I get to feed off of that and learn from them and ask my questions and have a consistent dialogue, which has been so valuable for me in this journey that I'm in, and has been a huge reason why I felt called to create this podcast, because there's just so much that I didn't know. And I'm certain that there's so many other people out there who don't know these things about our faith, you know? And so part of my goal is to share these things that I'm learning with you and pray that it reaches the people it needs to reach and resonates with you and helps you to open your heart more to God. And it doesn't mean that this faith journey that I'm on has somehow canceled out my grief. I don't want that to be the message that comes across, because grief is something that lives with you forever. If you've experienced grief, you know what I mean when I say that. When you lose someone that is so profoundly dear to you and so impactful in your life, the person you were before they passed away dies with them. And you become this whole other person that has to navigate life through the lens of grief. And that on its own is a whole other journey that we will talk about and share as we move forward together. But this faith journey is something that for me has been born out of my grief. And I think for me, the beauty that I have found through my grief is that it has chipped away at my hardened heart and allowed me to be open to hearing God's voice more. And even just saying that almost feels like it sounds so crazy to me, because these are things and concepts and ideas that I would have never considered before. I have definitely heard God's voice to me. And I think that this entire process of opening my heart up, of allowing God to carry this weight of grief with me and not trying to do it all by myself, has led me to this point right here. Sharing my story, sharing my testimony. It was just these series of events, these moments where I felt God calling me. I heard him. He pulled on my heart and said, "Come, sit with me, be with me." And once I stopped resisting that and just listened and followed, it changed everything for me. I look forward to sharing more of these moments and stories with you in episodes to come. And if you've made it this far, I thank you for your time. And I hope that something in this episode resonated with you. And definitely share it if you feel like you have a friend or someone you know that needs to hear this message as well. But before I sign off, I want to leave you with this Bible verse from Matthew 11:28. "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Thank you so much for listening, and I can't wait to see you in the next episode.
Thank you for joining me on a Catholic journey. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It helps others find the podcast and be a part of this journey. Until next time, remember, where Jesus leads the way, we are called to follow.